Despite 9 federal rate hikes over the past year, American job makers added 236,000 jobs in March. But that's nearly 100,000 fewer jobs than were created the previous month. The nation's unemployment rate also stands at 3.5%, which is a slight improvement from February at 3.6%. For more, let's bring in Lori Bettinger. She's the president of BancAlliance and a former director of the Troubled Assets Relief Program during the Obama administration. So let's start with the foundational question. Is the labor market finally getting cooler?
Well, I would say that we still have a really healthy labor market, as we saw in today's numbers, but it does feel like it's starting to slow a little bit. But again, it's still adding jobs. The unemployment rate's still low. We're seeing strength in a variety of sectors. But as we've talked about for a number of months now, everyone's looking for this slight cool down, and we might actually have it this month.
You think so? Okay, so let's talk about the quality of jobs and wages. Are they keeping up with inflation?
So they're not quite keeping up with inflation. We're still seeing wages increase, but not by as much in prior months. And, when you look at it and you see, for example, wages increase by numbers around like 4%, maybe 4.5% versus inflation, which has been running higher than that, they're not quite keeping up with inflation. But again, that's what, some of the policymakers and economists that are so focused on inflation are looking for, because a lot of these wage pressures are probably continuing to drive the higher prices. But if you're out there at the grocery store, you might not feel like your salary is going as far.
No, that's for sure. So anecdotally, we have a teenager in our house, and he and his friends have been looking for jobs without success for months. So they see this disconnect between their experience and all these reported openings.
Yeah, it's interesting. And we've continued to hear about, sometimes the companies that are looking for workers, they might be in locations, whether it's states or areas where there's actually a very low unemployment rate and they don't have a lot of available workers. And then to your point, there could be available workers maybe looking for jobs with more flexibility or part-time jobs, and they might not be in an area that, has those opportunities. So trying to match the, openings up with available employees is something that I think has always caused a little bit of friction in the numbers.
So let's take that a step further. If we talk about the geography, are there parts of the country where you see these greater job openings than others?
Well, I think, we've certainly seen in some of the Midwestern states, these numbers where unemployment rates are well below the national average, talking about 2.5%, versus our national average of 3.5%. And conversely, I think there's probably areas of the country that might be really dependent on, for example, the technology sector, which has, lost some jobs, although we're not really seeing it in the data in a way that perhaps the headlines might show, where, the job market's a little softer. But for the most part, in most communities, there's still a pretty strong job market when you look at the overall numbers.
And finally, on the Federal Reserve, what's your prediction for rate hikes in the near term and then the rest of the year?
Well, I think for the rest of the year, I would not expect to see a lot of rate hikes. I think the more complicated question is, what do we have with the next meeting? And maybe we'll see a 25 basis point increase, but I'm not sure. I think that at this point, we continue to hear about different factors, not just the job market inflation, but, for example, the stability of the banking system, which certainly feels like, less noise and attention than in prior weeks. But, at this rate, it feels like every day and every week can bring a new set of information. So I feel like it's a little difficult to predict right now. But this certainly feels like a positive jobs report in terms of, hopefully inflation might be starting to moderate.
Lori Bettinger, thank you for your analysis.
Thank you.